We are here with John Beckett, who has had, continues to have an illustrious career as a major business leader with a firm in Ohio that we'll talk about a little bit, and also the author of 2 books that have been translated into many languages and are available around the world. These books here are in English for your viewing enjoyment, and I'm going to put them in the library after we're done here. This one's called Loving Monday and Mastering Monday, as opposed to Thank God It's Friday or similar things.
I grew up in the home of an entrepreneur. My dad had started a company actually in the basement of our home. About the same time he got me going. I don't know exactly how those times correlated, but I figured it had to be pretty close that he was getting me started upstairs at the same time he was getting the business started in the basement.
You grow up, in a sense, in the business. You're seeing what your dad does, you're learning some business language at the dinner table, or...
From the earliest that I can remember, in fact, my mother told me about the pest that I was scooting around the table while she was trying to do secretarial work for my dad. And so, yeah, the conversations were almost from the start about business and business world. Grew up with that. That really were major transition points. There weren't that many of them, and yet the avenues that they took me down were profoundly different than they would have been if I'd made different choices.
Yeah. And they don't announce themselves with trumpets, for the most part. You're just walking along. You're going into a grocery store, and something happens. You're sitting down at the dinner table, and your dad mentions something to you, and no, you don't really have preparation in that way. So.
No, and don't you think that is why the whole concept of walking with the Lord is an important concept? Because we don't know. You could walk out this door and meet somebody, and maybe they become your life mate. Who knows? But I've found it's usually that way, and I try to prepare. I'm pretty analytical, as you can imagine, but the big things have come right out of the blue. It was after dinner one night, and we were living in the same town, and it was almost as casual as somebody might talk about the weather when he said, John, my business partner, is going to retire. How'd you like to come to work for me? And like that, my world changed.
Out of the blue in 1965.
Yeah, and this was a phone call. It was a snowy morning in February, and the person announced themselves as from our local police department and asked my name, and he said, your father, R.W. Beckett? Well, he's just been found slumped over the steering wheel of his car, such and such a location, and I realized he must have been going to work. They didn't tell me at the time, they may not have known, but it was a fatal heart attack. And so at age 26, he was 67 at the time. I view that as young now, by the way. But it was a fatal heart attack, and my world just changed radically in an instant. Looking at a boxer in a ring, it's usually not the one punch, it's the 1-2 punch. Mm-hmm. And I guess in God's providence, there needed to be a second punch for me. And it was another call, this one in the middle of the night, not from the police department, from the fire department. And the message was very succinct. Beckett, your plant's on fire. You better get out here fast. And when I got there, the flames were 20 feet above the roof of the plant, and I literally saw in front of my eyes everything that we had dreamed about, hoped for, given ourselves to as a family going up in smoke. And we had a volunteer fire department, small town, northern Ohio. All they'd done is fight barn fires before. And I just realized they were actually spraying water on the outside of the building. And I just said, we've got to go in. And they said, well, we don't know where volatiles are, where there may be things that explode. And I said, I know where everything is. And to their credit, this group of volunteers went in, and we battled that fire all night from within. You can't fight a fire like that on the outside. You got to go in. And by God's grace, we didn't see the whole thing destroyed. But that second experience just really was kind of a finishing blow in bringing me to the end of myself. And I wouldn't want either of those experiences again, but like I've heard Stan Oakes, our president here, say, I'd never want brain cancer again, but what God did through it was profound, and what God did through those two experiences has been profound for me. It was my responsibility to provide leadership through this very difficult time that we were in, and I now see more clearly that indeed it was God saying, I've made you responsible for this. I want you to step up to the plate and see that through.